Every man has his heroes, and every life is made up of stories. Heroic Stories is a series from heroicmen.org to find out why some men choose the harder path in life, even when it means losing everything, how they survived, and who they are today. These men seem heroic to us, even if they don't call themselves that. They seem to have an extra strength in their system, extra grit to battle doubt and find purpose. All of these men are seeking divine friendship with God, and they all believe in building up faith, building up men, and building up our future. Sponsored by CatholicSpeakers.com and hosted by Dominic from Heroic Men, get the mindsets, the scars, and the playbooks that these men have earned the hard way. Heroism isn't born, it's made, and these are their stories. Hi men, and welcome back to Heroic Stories. I'm Dominic from Team Heroic Men, and I'm joined today by Andrew Peloso, all the way up from Canada. Welcome, Andrew. Good to have you on the show.
Thanks, Dominic. It's really nice to be here.
Andrew has been in the trenches with us over the last couple of years, specifically on the video front. If you've probably seen some of his work at this point. He's produced the Be a Man series. He produced our end of year kind of recap on the future of Catholic men. Continued to be involved in a bunch of he filmed our Heroic Men Summit back in Orange County. It's some of the most epic and beautiful footage and production that we've ever had as a team. And so we absolutely encourage people to go and check out Andrew's website. He'll talk about it in a bit. Hire him. He's amazing. Give him tons and tons of work because we want to as well. But today is about meeting the man behind the camera, behind the mystery, hearing about Andrew's story. He's got his own path into, well, heroic masculinity and trying to figure out what that means and how you're living that. You know, we don't have the answers, and that's kind of what this show is about, is going out and foraging and hunting for a whole ton of really good answers and insights and experiences. So, Andrew, I want to get right into it with you. Our first question is always a story of heroism that absolutely lights you up, and it could come from the news or it could come from your own past or somebody you know. But when somebody goes, "Hey, let's shoot the breeze and talk stories of epic stuff," and you go, "Hey, I got one," where does your mind go?
I think for me, and maybe apologies if this is too simple of an answer, but recently with the House of David series on Amazon Prime.
Oh, I haven't seen that. It's good.
The story, yeah, I really enjoyed it. The story of David and Goliath is just what a mighty story for us men. It really captures your attention. It's an example in my mind of secular media telling a story that's biblical, and they did a pretty good job. It was something that really lit me up. I would say, as far as like a story of heroic masculinity, it's good for so many reasons. It's good because David was so not the right fit. He was so simple, and God used his simplicity and his vulnerability and his humility to animate David with God's strength. And I really love that. There's not any one story that I can call to mind right now, but I've really been inspired by the stories of men behind the curtain who are working hard at their job and are endeavoring to be good and present husbands and good fathers. And there's kind of an archetype in my mind of what that means to be a good present man who's laid his life down for his family. And that preoccupies my mind often because, and maybe it is because I'm in the media industry. I'm always working with my team on crafting something that is now in the public forum, that's online. And I think that perhaps makes me more excited for the things that are not seen,
Mm-hmm.
The ways we live our life, the decisions we make, the sacrifices that we all try and make to glorify God and to be his sons. And yeah, I hope that answers your question. That's what I have, but those are kind of two, one biblical hero.
I want to poke a little bit more, especially into the David and Goliath thing. Like, the story means something to you, I'm sure, for a specific reason. Well, as you mentioned, there's a show. His life is a long life. Is there something specific about like one of the moments in there? Like, is it the David versus Goliath moment, or is it, you know, him as a shepherd going up against the lions, or is it the armor, or evading, trying to, you know, doing the wrong thing when he had every opportunity to make his life easier, something like that?
Yeah,
Which one of those is like really jumping out at you?
yeah, I think as a shepherd fighting the lions, it's you know, it's just evidence of his upbringing and his life, that there was real courage and fortitude that he possessed. But also, I think particularly was when he was anointed, you know, when he was anointed by God. God spoke into him. And so it's not, I think with masculinity, often I'll fall into the trap that it's what I'm doing on my strength alone that makes me a heroic or man or a very masculine guy. And as with all things with God, it's his wisdom is so far beyond us. So it's in our vulnerability, it's in our weakness that the real story of the greats emerges. And that's particularly where what I like is that God started the work in David. And then David, like all of us, had to have the courage to trust in God and follow that calling through in very simple, ordinary life for days and for weeks and for years, which ultimately has these critical moments of his story that we all celebrate and we all know well. But I like to think about what his daily life was like and what the mundane in his life was like, and how did he respond to being a heroic man in those moments, especially when God anointed him and called him out. I feel we all go into moments in our life where God asks something of us and we can be overwhelmed by that and we don't necessarily know what to do. But I think those are the most beautiful moments, because in that is the opportunity to develop those virtues of fortitude and to lean more on our Lord to be brought into mission. I don't know if any of that's making
It's good.
sense, but that's
It's
what
good.
coming
Let's
to
keep
mind.
going. I want to ask, like you said, the mundane moments of his life. You like to think about that, like the David outside of the spotlights, those tentpole moments that we tell stories about. Where does your mind go when you think of him being more that guy behind the scenes, just doing the things to keep everything going
Mm.
before it all goes down? What are you
Yeah, I
thinking of?
imagine him being very human. I imagine him being frustrated, feeling overwhelmed, like everything has become too much. I imagine him with the lions feeling just terrified and afraid. But then his faith moves him past his own handicaps, his own defects. I imagine him being quite kind and gracious. And I imagine him having a good sense of humor, because I think it takes humility to be able to actually be humorous and to take yourself not so seriously. Um, and I imagine him being deeply prayerful. So those are some of the things I think about.
You said that there are moments that come when we get to practice. They can be beautiful moments, you know, when we can practice that virtue of fortitude. How do you handle those? What goes through your mind? And we can get to a little bit more about maybe when stuff has gone really wrong in the past, but there's lessons that you have now learned and that you're now maybe seeing acted out or lived out in David's life. What's one of those lessons that you're practicing to apply when stuff really gets hard and maybe there's that moment of awareness, you're like, okay, here's where this whole fortitude thing comes into play. For somebody who's never even heard what that word means,
Mm-hmm.
what is fortitude and how do you understand it and apply it and make sense with it?
Mm. Yeah, I think fortitude, another word obviously for it being courage. It's for us men, maybe the ability to suffer and to suffer well, to sacrifice, could be used in more modern terms of to delay instant gratification, you know, to put yourself on hold and maybe what you want most for a greater good. I think that is definitely courageous behavior. And in my life, I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more, really struggled with substance abuse actually in my earlier days, my young adult life with, it was like torture, you know, and I could not stay sober. I could not sober up. And so what was the first action for me? The first action was surrender. The first action was admitting defeat. And that doesn't sound very courageous, at first glance, to admit that I'm toast and that I need God. But in the action of surrender, I think that's maybe the first start to learning what humility is, at least as a goal to strive towards. Because in a statement or action of surrender, what do? I acknowledge that I'm not God, that I have no business managing my own life, and that I desperately need the Father's help to help me through this chaos, the chaotic time that I'm in, to just take it one moment at a time. And that's kind of my going back to it with David it's the mediocre parts of life, the parts that are not the critical moments, that I think are so fascinating, because I don't know where it's from, but that saying that we're all familiar with of like, do the little things well, and then maybe you'll be ready for the big game. You'll be ready for the big event. I think that's very true. I think there's no refuting that. So I like to look at those moments where we're being asked to be courageous. Oftentimes, what comes to me is that in order to be courageous, I first have to get out of my own way. And I have to surrender, and I have to ask God for help, because I'm not enough. I need him. And by putting that into practice, I think there's it's just a bunch of virtues that can hopefully flower and come into being as we work on these things, as I work on these things in my own life. And that's a really fascinating thing to talk about for me. And that was my experience with substance abuse, and then ultimately recovery, and now having the gift and the immense grace to be a sober man who's not afflicted in that way anymore. That was my fight that brought me into relation with our Lord.
That's beautiful. We'll come back, I think, to that. There's more I want to plumb there, but you've brought up your story a little bit right there, and I'd like to pull on that thread for a minute with you. So, what's been one of the darkest decisions or most difficult decisions that you've ever had to make? And how did you survive it?
Well, yeah, in this story, and my life story, it can't be changed. It really is a story of addiction and then recovery. Perhaps the darkest moment was in making a decision that I had to admit defeat. And so I think I used pride as a safety net, a wall of defense to protect myself. And that was a real hit to my ego. That was a real loss of pride moment.
Were you working in video at the time, or were you doing other things?
Yeah, I was working. I was still able to keep a job, thankfully. And so I had a lot being asked of me, but there was this darker part of my life that many people didn't see that was taking root in me.
Sounds like you were under a lot of pressure at the time.
I was definitely under a lot of pressure, and it really made me, when you do something over and over and over, and you try and fix your own problems and it's never working, that's a really tough position to be in. That's a really dark and difficult moment, because you see your own inadequacies. It's just right there in the mirror for you. And, but that is the first blessing or first gift. Some friends of mine call that the gift of desperation. It's like the first gift that acknowledges that I'm not God and I need him. Mm-hmm. And so it was in that moment where it was the darkest moment of my life, but it was the end of a chapter that would start off something that was so bright and full of light, Yeah.
How did you, if you were given the gift of desperation, how did you then get to a point where you could accept or understand it's only up from here? I'm being invited to, like you say, a new chapter. How did you get from one to the other? That's a leap. That's a quantum leap there for a lot of us.
Yeah, it is. It was quantum leap for me as well. I think it's seeing it work. It's seeing a godly life where God is at the center as best as we can. We fail every day, where we are really trying to serve God and put God first, and then be of service to others, and to get out of the way and trust that if I do that work well, God's going to take care of me. And it's in those little mundane moments of life of having that proper hierarchy, that hierarchy of service, that I started believing that this is working. This is fundamentally different than
Hmm.
if I was managing my own ways, my own life. And that was the tipping point for me. That's where I really started noticing that God's ways are not mine. And boy, is this sweeter.
What did you start noticing? Like, what was feeling obvious that you're like, this is the better thing to react or to do or to choose? What were you seeing?
Yeah, it all probably looks the same. I'm still
Okay.
working a job, I'm still have the same family, have the same friends, have the same interests. Um, but it's an internal job. It's like my heart had changed. There was more peace. There was a little less anxiety. There was a little less chaos. When chaotic moments happened, I would start having that little voice inside and starting to rely on that little voice of like, it's okay. Just breathe one day at a time. You don't need to make any crazy decision right now. You don't need to try and solve the situation right now. You can just endeavor to be present and bring God in. So it's very much an inside job. And I think that's what's most exciting about it. And that's where the real giants are as far as people I look up to. They're so ordinary, yet they're so strong and filled with so much conviction. And you feel so peaceful being around them. Those are the greats. Those are the legends in my life today. They're not actually doing anything exceptional. It's all hidden. It's a quiet walk with God. Yeah.
Uh, you did say something interesting about hierarchies of service. I want to ask about that. But I do want to probe a little bit more, and you can say no more and just continue on if you want. But sometimes people change because path that they're on is like narrowly miss a car crash, something awful could have happened, and then some people tap out because they're finally exhausted and they see the light of a new path that opens up something new. What was your journey?
It was a little bit of a mix of both. Substance issues was landing me in the hospital as a young man. That's not very
Like
normal,
early
and that's
20s kind
very,
of thing, or
yeah,
teens? Wow. Okay.
yeah. And so that's just terrifying, and you start kind of looking death in the face in some
Wow.
of your
Yeah.
worst moments, and that definitely gives that last will to survive,
Hmm.
that last inspiration. So unfortunately had to face that a couple times in my addiction. So there was that, but then there was also the second, which you mentioned, about just finally being done. Eventually it was just, there was no more fight in me. I just had to quit. I knew I was in a precarious situation, and I knew I didn't possess the solution. And so in that moment, we all face that moment in different ways. We're at the fork in the road, and there's kind of two choices. One is to drift into despair, and depression, and lick our wounds, and that's hell on earth, in my view. In my opinion, that is a living hell. And the other option is to relinquish our pride and say, God, I need help. And then in a more practical human way, you know, mom, dad, I need help. Brother, I need help. It's this acknowledgement that we are not enough.
Hmm.
And I think that's in all of our stories, isn't it?
I think
Yeah.
especially for young men, like everything you're saying, I'm like, yeah, this is all mirrored in my life. The ego of a young guy, I want to, strike out. I can do this on my own. And then you reach a point where you just mid 20s, early 30s, you crash and you realize I can't do this alone. And it sounds like there was a lot of loneliness as well. And so numbing, it just was a practical survival thing to do to get through a lot of the tension that you were under. Was loneliness like a big thing for you, or was it something that you put yourself into to get a job done and then it just didn't work out?
Yeah. I do really think addictions of all forms are, you could call them an isolation of sorts. It encourages isolation and loneliness, which only makes the problem worse, right? And so, on the flip of that, what solves addiction is connection, right? Connection, spiritual connection with God the Father, connection with our friends and family. That is the antidote to the chaos. And there was a lot of loneliness, and for two reasons. Like, it would also become, with substance abuse and addiction, you kind of burrow away and you start not having the same kind of respect for yourself that you used to, and you just don't want to be seen, right? But then I also don't think it's a winning strategy to having beautiful relationships of connection that you lean on when you are living that way. It doesn't attract friends, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
You said hierarchies of service as a phrase that made sense to you, and it's what gave you meaning and helped you start doing things different. What does that mean? And what
Yeah.
are you doing?
And maybe I think I might have misspoke. What I more mean is hierarchies of authority. And my response to various people I meet ought to be giving of myself, right? This is not a lonely isolation worldview. That's not what saved me. It's trying to look beyond myself. So when I look at that hierarchy of authority, it's God the Father, right? And then if I'm blessed now. I have a wife. I have 1-year-old son, and
Congrats.
we're expecting our second in
Wow.
May this
Beautiful.
year. So after God the Father, it would be my family. Not only is there an authority structure there, there is a just call to action, call to service to my family, right? That would be, my extended family, my
Right,
friends,
right.
those that employ me, my clients, my staff. And I try and look at things as far as how can I serve. And Dominic, I fail every day. This is not, I've got this figured out, and I will never have this figured out. But the adventure is in trying and giving as much as I can to try and be a good man that is not focused on himself anymore, but is focused on service to others, because that isolation based, self seeking, self absorption almost killed me, physically almost killed me. And that's what addiction is, right? It's not pretty, but it's so common in today's world. But the real antidote to that is connection. And how do you connect with people? Well, you ask them questions. You listen to their stories, and you actually listen instead of what am I going to say next? You try and serve. And with that, I think it's the beautiful antidote God has given us to the chaos of self-seeking.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Visual metaphor that comes to my mind is that moment in, what is it, Mask of Zorro with Antonio Banderas, where he's like, his life's a crapshoot. And what's his name? What's the name of the old guy? It's amazing. Anyhow, the Zorro figure draws
Yeah.
2 circles in the sand and says, "Here are your priorities, your zones of priority. What about the bad guy I want to kill? Don't worry about him. He's later. These are where you start." And as you pointed out, there's you, and there's God, and then there's family, and then there's work. And honestly, stuff like that, little things like what you just said, is such a antidote to the poison of how the culture all around doesn't want you paying attention to that and wants you obsessing over everything outside of the actual place where you can go to work. And then you
Mm-hmm.
spend and you bleed out all of your energy and your creativity and your interest and everything else. And you've got literally nothing for your family. And obviously, as men, we can't live that way. We're not ever supposed to. It's an impossible thing that you can't survive. And we have to find awful ways to try to deal with that. Numb it, get through it. And it's just, you endure disappointment from everybody, even the culture that's never happy with what you're. So, like what you said, coming back to home, coming back to your feet on the ground. I like that you said David facing down the lions, and I'm like, there's one mission: save these sheep. That's it. Life gets a lot simpler when you can come home that way.
Yeah. Oh, that's so well said, Dominic. And I totally agree. That's been a focus for me as of late. Recently being married, we're going to celebrate our second anniversary in a couple weeks here, and having a whole new life and a beautiful vacation. What does coming back to home, what should that be? What am I doing here? Right? Why am I working? Why am I trying to make money? All of these things, like when you start looking at them through the lens of how does this help me live out my vocation to my wife, to my children, for the love of God, things start making sense. And I totally agree with you, Dominic. Things become safer, and simpler. It's just not a bunch of chaos all the time. So I really believe the enemy's goal is to sow as much chaos and discord into our lives as possible,
Mm-hmm.
to take us out of the fight.
Totally.
Right.
Or to keep us embroiled in all the wrong fights. I've got this silly metaphor, like we're born to be hobbits and airdropped into a Doom Everwar. And it's like you're never supposed to be in those kind of situations. And that's what the culture puts up. Something you said earlier about you said the word humility. I think a lot of young men turn to things like stoicism, right? And although you didn't mention that, I'm curious to hear what you think about that, because stoicism is a lot of white knuckling through like
Mhm.
solo spirituality or making it through the job. And I don't know enough about stoicism. Maybe you don't or you do. I'm curious what you think. It's interesting when there's a lot of good, strong making tenets to how stoicism works, like delayed gratification, like you said. You give your word, you see it done, kind of thing. But if you put all of that at the service of, as you're saying, God, therefore that is humility. Humility is not putting yourself and your vision of yourself as the goal of your life, but putting God as the goal of your life. I'm curious what goes through your mind with that. How do you define humility? How do you seek to be a man who is humble? Because a lot of us look at that word and go, ew, no thank you. Good men, strong men. Like what do you mean humility, right? So how do you make sense of that and also seek to be a man that you believe in, right?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a great point. Just to touch quickly on Stoicism, with some of the greats like Seneca, and it was when you look at just Stoicism and just like hedonic pleasure, hedonism, you can see clearly what wins. What wins is the Stoic who is delaying gratification and focused on building resilience in himself. Now, with knowledge of the resurrection, Stoicism actually still falls short, though it has very good principles. It's really good in building virtue, rooting out vice. It also tampers the appetites, right, that we all face and struggle with. And so it's an amazing thing, but is almost for to almost cut out all the emotions, to cut out the drama, to cut out the dance of life. And that's where the one true church breathes life into stoicism, not taking it all, but taking what works and putting that into this drama of Christ's revelation. And that's where things start to make sense, because I imagine Stoics, I have some friends who are like just love Stoic philosophy. Eventually there's something that they become a little less human, right? They don't become, as we all want to strive to become saints. What is a saint but a man fully alive, right? In unity with God our Father. That is the goal. And so there is discipline and self-mastery and all of that in this beautiful drama of Christianity. But Stoicism kind of just leaves it flat. And so that's where, to answer your root question, your second question about humility, I don't know if this is just I don't know if this is the right definition, but just something that resonated with me with humility is to be a humble man is to be on the journey of seeing myself the way God the Father, my creator, my heavenly Father sees me, right? So that's not more than or less than, it's as I am, right? And I think that's quite a sober, realistic view of oneself and something that I want to build. And I think that I fail every day with it, but that's what makes humility as a virtue so attractive, because you know what you are and you know what you are not. And there's room for God to work with that, where pride cometh before the fall, right? There's very little room to work with pride, of which, I'm as prideful as any. So, yeah.
Well, I love what you said with that concept. So humility is seeing myself the way that God sees me, right?
Mhm.
How do you do that? Are there practices? Are there prayers? Is it a little kind of a meditation, or is there a reflection that you kind of follow? Is something you read? I love the idea. How
Yeah.
do you do it?
I think it's going back to that hierarchy of authority when we were talking about service. I think it's constant acknowledgments, little prayers throughout the day and I forget to do this a lot too, but I really try okay, God, your will be done, thy will be done. It's remembering where you sit in the hierarchy, where you sit in the authority structure, that I think builds the dispositions to learn about humility and to grow that virtue habitually. So I think it's little check-ins, little prayers throughout the day, and little acknowledgments of how weak we all really are, you know, and that if we have anything, it's because God in his grace and mercy has willed it and allowed it. And gratitude's another thing that I think is really big for building humility is starting to look at little things, and gratitude lists are huge. I've actually have a mentor of mine who's tasked me with starting to do a gratitude list of at least 5 things every morning. And it really works.
It's
You know, I
amazing.
could be miserable and it's just a Tuesday and I just don't want to do anything.
Well, at
And then
least
all
the
of a
chair
sudden,
didn't collapse. Praise the
yeah,
Lord.
it can be as simple as that, you know. The sunshine today, it's quite beautiful outside. And,
I
you know,
kid you
I
not,
have a
middle
roof
of the
over my
night, I'm like, thank you, Lord, for an indoor bathroom. Like, it would suck to go out middle of winter right now.
head.
And I get to stay
Exactly.
cozy. Like, thank you, Lord. This is really nice. I'm glad of this. You said you've been married over a year now, or 2 years?
Coming on 2 years,
No, 2
February.
years. What's changed for you now that you've embarked on this new chapter? As you look back 2 years and you look back to where you are now, what's something that's now different for you?
I've
Again,
always loved
in
what I
how
do
you're
for,
trying to be a man is the
yeah,
context. Yeah.
I've always loved to what I do for work. I have really good friends. I have a beautiful network. It's just such a gift that I do. Um, but then what changed when I got married is I had a reason. I had a very concrete reason now on what I'm sacrificing for, you know? And I think
Okay.
that's a real gift. Like a single life is a blessing and gift as well. But married life, the vocation of marriage has as its gift, it's a mutual call to sacrifice, you know? To will the good of the other, to endeavor to love your spouse, even when that's really challenging.
Yeah.
And it gives a real daily practical way to see where you can endeavor to sacrifice, where you can endeavor to try and be a heroic man for the glory of God, to serve your family, to build a good family. I just love it. I feel it's so practical. It's just such a joy to be married. What can I say?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I love that. A concrete reason to sacrifice. It's like I remember feeling exactly the same way. It's like going from being a like a road flare to becoming a blowtorch, right? You're where your
That's good.
attention goes, right? Not just in terms of like priorities, but also in terms of like if I want to be a good man, I think that marriage is like one of the only things that I can think of, not even like a religious life or being a priest can match up to the focused and intensity, like the pressure room that marriage can be for like getting you to see and pay attention because there's nowhere to hide and you
There's
can't
nowhere,
run.
Dominic. There's nowhere. I was thinking about that just a couple weeks ago over the New Year's and Christmas break of just how painful it is when you have some of your glaring defects and things that God has invited you to work on, and just how your wife sees that, and that there is literally nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. As a single man, I could hide that. You know,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
the party's over, the charade's done, and I'm going back to my house and I'm turning on Netflix and I'm just chilling out, and no one has to see me. But all things good and bad is observed within a marriage.
I think there's a whole nother conversation there, but I think that's so. What do you think then? Does I've got this working theory that every man needs, to quote you, a concrete reason to sacrifice. And I think I want to dial that in even further. A face, because a face is a person. It's not an abstract thing. I think that every man needs that. If maybe it's only for a time and then you pick a different person. It could be could be like serving someone at a homeless shelter. It could be showing up at the parish and helping somebody do something. It just can't be an idea. I haven't thought this through yet. I'm curious what you think. Can't stay an abstract idea. It's got to come down to be a real human being and a person. And I think the best form is something like marriage, where you're both getting into the ring together and you're refusing to ever quit come hell or high water. But even if you're single, I think that there's got to be a way to pull your life and self into focus by doing something, like you say, in a state of service.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What's going through your mind? What would you recommend?
I really like it. I'm just starting to think about when you said a face, like a person, and just how theologically based that is. When we look at the Trinity, this union, this mystery of persons, we look at the personhood of Jesus. I think it is a call for us to get into communion, get into relation with people. And I was starting to think, well, how do you do that? And then you just made a perfect example of like, that's what makes the soup kitchen work of service so beautiful. There's a person there, right? There's someone there that you are serving concretely. Could be all the way expanded out into in spiritual life, like having a beautiful picture of Mary, our mother, that's associating your prayer life, your prayers to Jesus through Mary. And there's personhood on the wall. There's a beautiful painting. And then ultimately with marriage too. I even look at those who are ordained and just how they have a super ordinary call and vocation, but just how much personhood and calling out one by one to serve and sacrifice for the glory of God, how that is, we all experience that. I think that's really good, because if you don't have a person to sacrifice for, what do you got? Like you have yourself then. And I don't know if we were in the season of New Year's resolutions and all of that, like the will to work out so that I can look better for myself and feel a slightly more healthy. It lasts maybe 2 weeks if I'm lucky. It's true, right? Like that kind of those more in the cloud reason to sacrifice.
Mhm.
It doesn't really stand the test of time in my view. But then once you have a person that you are sacrificing for out of love,
Right.
it starts to click. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good
Like
theory.
when you're accountable to somebody who sees you. And that's why marriage is, um, it's the answer to a lot of things that I think men need. I can't speak for women. I'll let they'll speak for themselves. For men, it's like what we need in terms of how we engage with reality, how we come to meet Christ, how we come to model Christ. Marriage is like, pressure cooker is the wrong word. It's like a container that creates pressure to, turn coal into diamonds. Right? It's like to take all the chaos. I like I use that word. Take all the chaos that's in your life and in your attention and your focus and your energy, and then it collapses it into lattices that can start to shine and actually make
Mhm,
sense. And we men, I think we need that pressure.
mhm,
The challenge, I think, for a lot of us, maybe this goes back to some of the loneliness that you were talking about earlier, is to be seen with a view of loving kindness. And that's something I don't think a lot of men get. I'm fortunate to have like a once a month I meet with he's a brother, a monk, and we just sit and chat. And there's a lot of that that's just very healing because he never judges. He's he gives that like I said, that gaze of loving kindness. And he
mhm,
goes, well, maybe you failed this month, maybe you didn't. Doesn't matter. What are you going to do tomorrow? Right? Keep picking up, keep trying again. And I'm like, I am not used to having somebody model that for me. That kind of tolerance and patience and accompaniment. And always, go higher, friend. Don't just stay there and say, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. Don't make only that your prayer. Like, go higher. Ask, to, like you said, I like how you said, see yourself how God sees you. Behold, my beloved son. I don't have an answer on how more men can, not get access to it, but can find that. But if you can, grab onto it. Because I think we men, we need to be mentored in that way. And then sometimes you just do the best you can and you find a face, find a life for someone that you can serve. Let's talk about your heroes, Andrew. Who are some of your heroes? And they could be either in your life or could be in history, could be in movies, even people that you admire.
Yeah, I have a concretely as a hero, my father. Um, he also ran a business, had 9 kids, still married to this day, and is a real example of putting things in right priority. And I can't even remember him not being there for family dinner, like on any given weekday or weekend. He's just really cared about that accompaniment that you were talking about with that monk. Really cared to do that for his sons and 2 daughters. And so I have that as a very concrete example. I have big shoes to fill as far as what it means to be a man who is there at the service to his family, sacrificing for his family. As I'm starting to build a family with my wife, I think about that a lot. almost constantly of what kind of man, what kind of father am I going to be? So there's an example. Some of the intellectual heroes of mine right now with recovery and substance abuse, it was kind of the first curiosity to come back to my Catholic faith and to open the door of faith came from that psychologist, Jordan Peterson. And I would always love listening to him because
Absolutely.
he had a way of like that masculine call for
Mhm.
more, for adventure, for greatness. He had a way of just speaking that into me and gave me a lot of hope, especially in the early days, to sober up and to start, cleaning my bedroom and doing simple things, like getting things in check. So that as far as an intellectual, I would say it's our good friend JP. And then I would say more on the spiritual variety, quite an intense figure, but just amazing. It would be actually Father Ripperger, some of his talks, especially one on what heaven could be like and winning the crown of glory that's talked about in the New Testament. And a real like motivating thing that he's said that I've been kind of fascinated with is that look at your vices, like Andrew, look at your vices right now and the things that you just profoundly struggle with. Not only is that an indication that God made you and that he loves you, it is an invitation to go on the adventure of your life, because in heaven you will be known for winning the crown of glory, having built the virtues through God's grace that were the exact opposite of the vices you struggle with, So if I'm an overly angry man, I'm called into the drama of life to develop these virtues of patience and genuine love and care for others and peacefulness,
So you're
whether
saying
it be
they're
lust,
your ankle
purity,
weights.
whether, all of these. So it's, I just love that. I don't know. It captures me. And so he would be another great in my hall of greats currently. Yeah.
Can I go back to ask you about your dad? To have a dad like that, what's a little bit maybe of his story? Because the way you said it sounded like he could have spent a ton of time perhaps at work, missing the family events. How was he the kind of a man who could be so present to all of?
Yeah. He's real quick. His story is youngest in a family that suffered divorce, and he saw his family get ripped apart. And, him being the youngest, he really lived through that in his younger years. And then being baptized Catholic, had a coming to moment, like a reconversion of sorts in his 20s, and put some bad habits aside and focused on building an authentically Catholic life. And I think that's what breathes so much courage and strength into him as a man, as the father of our family household, is he knows what's at stake. And I think that has been the gift that he possesses as to why he doubles down in service to his family, to give the gift of his presence and his time, because he knows what life is like without that, without a present father. And I think he's done a good job of that. So, yeah,
Beautiful. That's high praise. Well, our final question that everyone loves to hate.
go for it.
Who do you dream of being a hero for? And
Mm.
you can't play the God card or your family card because those are givens.
I think I'd like to grow in heroism for the young men that are coming up right now. Have maybe felt a bit robbed by the culture, by what they're told, by what they're even told masculinity is. And I would like to be one of hopefully countless, many great men who encourage them to develop a life of virtue and discipline and service to others till that becomes the popular narrative. The narrative that, oh yeah, of course, that you want to be a good father, you want to be present, you want to be hardworking, you want to be good at your job. If I could play some tiny role in the drama of that adventure for young men who are just in junior high or something right now, that will be something I'm quite grateful to be a part of. Yeah.
If you had a message to share with these young men, sounds like there's a healing of your inner child kind of thing. There's a
Mhm.
speaking to yourself as a young man, things that you wish you'd known back then that could have made life easier, or who knows, you probably would have fought against it all anyway and gone your own way. But if you had a message to share, what would you want them to know or understand?
I'd want them to know that they've been given a lot of strength, and it doesn't look like what the world tells you strength is. And it wasn't given to you for you. It was given to you to give to others who are more vulnerable, who are in difficult moments, who are weaker. I would want to tell them that they were built for adventure, and every moment they spend on the sidelines living someone else's story online, on social media, they lose some time to go on their own adventure and the great mystery and drama of life, and that they're worth going on that adventure. You know, it's actually something that they ought to do, and they're going to have an amazing time, have some of their highest highs and most crushing lows, and that God promises us the fulfillment of all desire in heaven. And this is ultimately a pilgrimage. So that's what I would say.
I think that's beautiful. So thanks again, Andrew, for coming on. There's more questions I'm sure people would like to hear from you. Maybe we'll have you come back someday and do an encore, because we plan to keep working with you. You've provided us with absolutely wonderful stuff. You've been a phenomenal partner for helping us to create media. And given the world the way it is and how apps work and the online, internet works, we need a lot of good media. And so you've helped us create some truly beautiful stuff that tens of thousands of men have been able to watch. We've had over 11,000 men's groups watching the Be a Man series that you helped produce, with Father Larry and all of that. So give us the high level overview. What is it that you do, and where can people find you?
Yeah. So I'm a film director and producer, and I like to make films, documentaries, and commercials. I have the most incredible, hardworking, humble, sacrificial team out there. They're truly greats and giants I get to work with every day. And our company is called VEK Labs. You can find us at VKLabs.com. And in addition to working in the marketplace and making good commercials and videos for businesses, we have as our aim to try and be a part of the cultural story of breathing truth, goodness, and beauty wherever possible into the conversation. And that is some of the work that we have felt so honored that we've been able to partner with Heroic Men and play just a small role of assisting in that.
Thanks for joining us. If this story connected with you, send it to someone. And if you want to chat with us about anything that we've said, send us a message at heroicmen.org/stories. Our partner at CatholicSpeakers.com has built the easiest way to book powerful Catholic speakers for your men's event. They are the #1 resource worldwide for event organizers and Catholic speakers. Book easily, confidently, and ask for several grants to support ministry to men. Visit heroicmen.org/speakers today. Come and share your journey in the Heroic Brotherhood, our online community for Catholic men like you. Get the app with the best Catholic media for men, including Heroic Men's original series, Be a Man. It's all free because an alliance of donors already paid it forward for you. Stand with us. Let's build the future of Catholic men. Will you pay it forward? $5 a month pays it forward for 5 men. Visit Heroic Men to stand with us. Because men like us, we leave no man behind. Visit heroicmen.org today.